Welcome to everybody who's joining us for our webinar today. We're very excited to be here and to have this opportunity to discuss Threatlocker and the value of zero trust protections and the great things we can do to keep endpoints secure. For anybody that's here that doesn't know me, I'm Ben Lawson. I am the general manager here at Burk I.T. And we're excited to have Deshaun with us from Threatlocker to demo and share all kinds of great information. And then we have Stephanie, who's in our sales and marketing team. She'll be curating our Q&A section. So if you have questions as you go along here in Microsoft Teams, just go up to the Q&A and enter your question, and Stephanie will let us know we've got something to talk about. So with that, let me go ahead and get us started. So click over here to some PowerPoint slides. Hopefully everybody can see the information on the screen. Really quickly, I think most of our attendees know who we are, but we are representing Burk I.T. Burk I.T. has been around for nearly 30 years now. We were established in 1996. We're a managed service provider working in Northeast Tennessee, Southwest Virginia, Western Carolina, and this whole Southeast region. We've got a great set of engineers who work with a great set of products to support our clients all throughout the region. So if you have any questions, if you have any needs, please don't hesitate to reach out and we will engage. But you're not here to learn about Burk, you're here to learn about Zero Trust and Threatlocker. So let's jump right in. The reason we're having this conversation is we are faced constantly with threats each and every day to our IT environments. We're dealing with ransomware attacks. We're dealing with a tremendous rise in business email compromise and the threats that brings to our organizations. We have zero-day vulnerabilities that are popping up each and every moment of each and every day that we have to be prepared to defend against. We deal with insider threats, folks that are doing things either accidentally or maliciously to threaten our environments, and we need tools to defend us against these types of threats. Added to that, we now have a world where generative AI is a thing. It is both a risk and a reward for all of us, because it has not only made the bad guys, the cyber criminals, more efficient at what they do. It's also helping our defensive tools become more effective. So we have to balance that risk reward out when it comes to artificial intelligence. And at the end of the day, all of these threats that we face can be very, very costly to an organization. Per IBM's cost of breach data from 2023, waiting on new numbers, but as of last year, the average U.S. cost of a data breach was nearly $10 million, $9.48 million. Worldwide, that number is closing in on $5 million. This is a number that is not only significant, this is a number that can be fatal to an organization. So we have to take the security of our devices, of our networks, of our users very seriously, and be prepared to address these threats in a proactive way to make sure that our information stays secure and that we don't put ourselves in this situation. So why are we talking about zero trust? Why are we talking about Threatlocker today? At the end of the day, as threats advance and evolve, our strategies need to advance and evolve along with them. We have to be prepared to evolve how we strategically defend our environments, which brings us to the concept of zero trust. At the end of the day, this is a strategy or a framework that assumes that nothing can be trusted by default, that we have to look at each and every layer of our organization, from our devices to our network segments to our end users to our entire identity and access management process, and verify those as we go along. We can't fall back to the model of, well, we trust certain things and we'll verify others. No, we need to verify our environment in real time all the time. We need to have strong access controls for our users, for our devices, and for our applications. We need to be monitoring and reviewing all of our network activity. And we have to have very granular and time-restricted authentication and verification processes in place at every level. Now, zero trust applies to everything. It can apply to our local and wide area networks. It can apply to our identity and access management approaches, our server and storage mechanisms and security. And very importantly, it needs to apply to our endpoint security. How do we look at our OS and application and user levels and know what's going on, know what's approved, know what should happen and what shouldn't happen, what is allowed and what is not allowed? So how does this concept of zero trust translate? At the end of the day, just because a user needs elevated privileges to run a specific program or execute a specific job function does not mean he or she should have access to load anything they want onto their workstation, or to manipulate any application in real time. Just because an application is valid and it's trusted and it's something we've consciously installed does not mean that application needs to be able to execute code or leverage every aspect of the operating system. It should only do what it's designed to do when it's designed to do it. Just because a user needs to store certain files on a USB storage device as part of a specific job function does not mean they should be able to mount and use every USB device and move all of their files. We need to be very specific on what users should be able to do. This is the concept of zero trust, and this is why Threatlocker is such a key partner with Burk I.T and with our clients to secure our endpoints and keep our environment safe. So with that, I am excited to turn this over to Deshaun. Deshaun is going to walk you through all the wonderful values and benefits of Threatlocker and walk us through why this product is so important. So let me stop sharing, and Deshaun, I will hand it off to you.
All right, perfect. Thank you for the introduction. Thanks for having me. I'll go ahead and share my screen, show everybody how Threatlocker makes this zero trust concept so easy to implement and kind of live with in their environments here. And right there, I should be sharing. So just like to get started, as Ben kind of prefaced there, Threatlocker is a zero trust endpoint protection platform, and we look to make this a lot easier than it has been in the past with other products here. And then I'll get started by installing the agent, but more specifically installing the agent in our learning mode. That's kind of the first step to make it easy, where we go in and we don't just start blocking all your stuff because that would be a little disruptive there. We go in, we learn what's already running, your programs, your files, the drivers, things of that nature there. And we go ahead and build a list of policies that we do trust, and we implement those so that the things that are already running can go ahead and continue to run as if Threatlocker wasn't there. But then that's when we secure your machines, blocking anything new from executing on your machine if it is not on the list, including things like ransomware, malware, viruses, unwanted software. Again, if it's not on the list, it does not get to run. But speaking of that list and still making things nice and easy, we'll come over here into our policy list. And one thing you'll find here is that we already bake in a good list of things that we commonly see in the office space. So we're going to have things like Microsoft Office, some popular video communication apps, popular web browsers. Again, we don't want to slow you down, but we want to make this nice and secure. And one of the most important things you're going to see on the screen here are these built-ins. Now, built-ins are a really, really cool thing that we have here at Threatlocker. This comes from us knowing that allow listing, whitelisting has existed in the past, but it's been very, very cumbersome for both people to live with and people to manage, because people like Burk I.T would have to come in and build a list of things that they think that their users want to run and need to be able to run themselves. They would deploy that list out, and everything would be fine for maybe a week. And then new files would come in. Well, allow listing, whitelisting tools, they don't like new files. So those new files being updates would get blocked. Now, getting updates blocked is not the biggest deal for a lot of users. Yes, for internal teams, they want those updates applied. But the worst thing for users is when those updates actually would get applied. When those updates got applied, they changed the definition of the application as it was on the list, meaning now those don't match. Now that software gets blocked. And that doesn't make users happy when the stuff that they need to get their job done starts getting blocked by that new security tool, forcing the IT team. Burk I.T would have to come in, manually update that definition, push it back out just to get you guys back up and running on software that has already been approved. Well, Threatlocker doesn't like causing downtime or giving anybody any extra work. So with these built-ins here, we actually have an application team managing over 4,000 applications. And what they're doing is they're getting those brand new updated hashes directly from the vendors as they're released. And we update these definitions on your behalf so that by the time all of you guys receive the newest version of Microsoft Office, those new files that belong to that application are already permitted on your systems, reducing any downtime or extra work on Burk I.T side. So making things run nice and smoothly and still secure for you. But from here, we can also take a look at our unified audit, which is really going to be our hub of visibility within Threatlocker. And it shows us two very important things. The first thing it's going to show us is what would have been denied on my endpoints if they were already secured. Again, another way for us to reduce any downtime or interruptions here, because although we're doing 95% or more of the work automatically, there may be some proprietary line of business, special applications, things that we have never seen before and don't have a built-in for. But they're still going to need to run and do updates and things of that nature after being locked down. So for things like that, people like me, your solutions engineers, will work with Burk I.T, your teams internally here, and come in and look at all of these items. And we can get even more details about what's running. So not just what's running, but where it's running, what's calling it to run, what created the file that's running, who signed the file, lots of details that we can use to work together and create custom rules, ensuring all of your software gets to run now and in the future with little to no interaction on anybody's part. Now, the second thing this unified audit is going to show us is the rest of our activity. And that's going to include things like our elevation, our network, and our storage activity, which equates to reads, writes, deletion, movement of data across your endpoints, the network traffic in and out of your endpoints, as well as elevation and application information, executions, installs, who's running what as admin, or at least trying to. Now, once we have all of our policies in place, we're not seeing any more of those simulated denies. That is when we secure these machines, enforcing the list, meaning if it's on the list, it gets to run. If not, it is instantly denied. And I'll show a quick example of that over here on Bob's demo desktop, my nice secured machine here, where Bob has downloaded a good bit of files. Now, one of the good things about Threatlocker is we don't care what these files are. They could be good, they could be bad, it could be ransomware, it could be TeamViewer. None of that matters. All that matters is, are you on the list of software that is approved in my environment? And if it is not, it is simply denied by default. And that's because we're not taking the AV or the EDR approach of, hey, let's just let everything under the sun run on this computer. But we'll watch it. And if it's on a known bad guy list, or if it's doing something we know is bad, then we'll go ahead and stop it from doing whatever it's already doing, maybe try to quarantine it, delete it. And that takes keeping up with a giant growing list of all those bad things out there. Well, we don't want to do that. That's way too reactive for us. We would much rather keep up with a very small list of only the good stuff that should be running in your environment and block everything else, including ransomware, by default. But with that being said, users will sometimes need to change the environment. So for things like that, we'll give this little pop-up down here, letting them know, hey, we went ahead and blocked that for you, but if you feel like you still need to run that in your environment, you can go ahead and request access, which brings up a nice little pop-up over here, some more of those beautiful Threatlocker logos, Threatlocker name there, letting the user know, hey, we blocked you from running TeamViewer. TeamViewer, in this case, is remote access software, and if approved, it could have access to your files, to the internet, to your registry, and to your other applications. And here is where that software is developed. Now, after reading that, if you still feel like, hey, I just need this in my environment, you can go ahead and give a reason. You can also optionally enter in an email address so that you guys receive an alert once a decision's been made. But first, you'll go ahead and send that request in straight to Burk IT. They're always going to get this in that response center, but we also provide PSA integration so they can get a quick ticket, mobile notifications. They'll instantly know, hey, I need to run something new in the environment. They have the ability to come in and see who made the request on what machine, what the file is called, but clicking on this request gives them even more information to be able to make this decision, where they can come up here and we can see all the details for this file. We can make sure it's validly signed by TeamViewer. We can make sure it's not getting a bunch of red hits on VirusTotal. So we can make sure this is something we would actually want to allow you to run in your environment before processing the approval. But then once I've determined this is good, this is something safe, I would let them run, it's appropriate for the environment, we can just easily scroll down and start with this matching known application here, where Threatlocker conveniently provides a built-in that's going to allow TeamViewer to run now and in the future. Now, I can go ahead and select that and determine if I just want to let a single machine run this new software, or to save myself time, if I already know everyone in this environment, all my workstation users need to be able to run TeamViewer in the future, I can go ahead and process this approval for the entire group all at once. But so far, all I've done is allowed TeamViewer to run. Now, maybe in your environments for security, we've removed all of those local administrative rights, which is great, except for on Burk IT side, because now they would traditionally have to send a tech over and put in a password to those UAC prompts, but not anymore, because we give them the ability to use elevation control. And what that allows them to do is keep those local administrative privileges away from the users where they can be weaponized and apply them only down to the processes that specifically need that elevation. And we can even imply a time limit. So in this case here, I need all of my non-privileged users to be able to install TeamViewer. I'm now granting them those privileges as local admins here, but only for this TeamViewer setup process, so that that elevation doesn't get weaponized and allow users to open up PowerShell, command prompt, other tools that they really don't need to be running with that privilege as a user. Now, another benefit of elevation control is this can be applied indefinitely. So for software that would traditionally require users to be admins all the time and have that full control over their systems, well, now we can take that away and only apply it to that one piece of software that needs it. Same thing for applications that require admin privileges for updates, where maybe you guys are used to calling in or submitting a ticket. Hey, QuickBooks needs an update again. I need you to pop in with the password. Well, now we can apply elevation control to just that updater process, reducing the need or removing the need for any local admins on your systems, keeping them much more secure. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and process this approval. This goes ahead and deploys the policies allowing TeamViewer to now run in this environment, and it's also going to provide a pop-up to that original user that sent the request, letting them know that their request was approved, and they can now run TeamViewer. So nice, easy, straightforward process there to allow new software in a secured environment. But this is especially easy because we had the built-in. Well, not every single file that gets requested will have a built-in associated with it. Like up here, where Bob also asked, can I run Google Chrome version 12.34? So we go ahead and open this request out. Now, the first thing I notice here is that this application is unknown, meaning I do not have a built-in for this piece of software, which leaves me with a couple of options. I can skip testing and throw any machine into installation mode. That's a passive state. It allows users to install whatever this software is. Maybe it's something proprietary line of business, and that's why we don't have a built-in for it. We would be able to allow this user to go ahead and install and run that application while we watch and learn, bundle that data up, and give you the ability to deploy policies to any other machine that also needs to install and run that same software. Incredibly convenient, especially if you know and trust that software. Now, in some cases, you might not trust the software or know exactly what it is. In this case here, this file is called Google Chrome version 12.34, but I'm a little surprised it doesn't match my Google Chrome built-in. And when I check the details here, I can see that it's not signed by Google, which is a little surprising for a Google Chrome installer. And then checking VirusTotal actually leads to a couple of hits here. So rather than just let Bob execute this file because he says, I need this, I'm going to go ahead and open a testing environment here. And what this does, it spins up a brand new virtual machine hosted by Threatlocker. It's not on any Burk I.T machines, it's not on any user machines, but a nice sandbox for me to safely run this application in first. But it's not just an empty sandbox. Up here, I'm going to have a nice little risk center. And what this does is it runs this file and everything that comes out of it through VirusTotal. We have canaries in this environment already embedded in, and if those are touched in any way, we get an alert right up here, as well as our full system monitoring. We're going to show you things like startup items, any network activity, file creation, registry changes, really anything that happens in this environment, Burk IT will be aware of before potentially allowing the software to run in any real environment. So at this point, they'll go ahead, run the application, expecting Google Chrome, but instead receiving command prompt windows and Christmas lights, which they can check out up here. And we see now there's a startup item called testvirus.bat, which is not a good sign for something that was a Google Chrome installer. If I keep on moving to my canaries, I can see I have some write activity on my credit card data, possibly encryption. Again, not a good sign. Now, last tab here, we can go to VirusTotal, and I now see that I have a ton of hits now that that application opened up. So I'm now very, very sure that this was not a Google Chrome installer. And I can go ahead and discard all of this data and this entire environment, having never allowed that file to run on any user's machine. But if this was something perfectly legitimate, a good application that users should be able to run, I could just as easily end and capture all of this data and deploy a policy to allow it to run on any user's machine in that environment. But again, here, I know this is bad, so I'm going to go ahead and discard it, keeping the environment safe with application control and a little bit of elevation control in there. Now, I like to start off with that TeamViewer example just to show we're not your average threat hunters. We're not out there looking for the viruses, the malware, the ransomware. We're giving you complete control over what is allowed in your environment and blocking everything else by default, which is a great first step into zero trust. Now, one of the problems that still remain out there are good applications are becoming weaponized by the threat actors. Things like Microsoft Office. We had the Felina vulnerability in something as common as Microsoft Word. 3CX phone system supply chain attacks. A compromised signed DLL was able to work its way into environments and attack certain machines. And then, of course, things like PowerShell. built into all of our users' machines here, but commonly utilized in a lot of zero-day vulnerabilities and attacks. And that's because by default, all of these applications have about the same level of access to your machines as a threat actor sitting at the machine themselves, where your apps are able to get to your other applications, your files, your registry, the internet. They have lots of unlimited access into a bunch of resources that they really don't need access to. And that is where our ring fence feature comes in. Now, what this ring fence does is it puts a limit on what your permitted applications are allowed to interact with on and across your users' machines. So for something like Office here, this is already permitted out of the box, allowed to run, so my document opens up just fine. However, we're going to provide that ring fence protection against documents like this here, which may get blasted out to a bunch of users in any given environment here. And what it's doing is saying that they are required to immediately change their password, and it provides that nice little convenient Office link to do so. Now, a lot of well-trained users are going to go ahead and hover over this link and say, wait a minute, that's going to take me to PowerShell. That's not going to be good. I'm not going to click that link. But again, they're pushing this urgency here so that they can catch somebody off guard, big stack of paperwork on their desk. They see this message and instantly think, okay, I need to click on this link. And as soon as they do, they find out what PowerShell has waiting for them, except in this case, you can see I'm not able to open PowerShell on this machine. Now, we'll take a look at this Office policy, and this is going to show you that while Office was able to open with no problems, we're actually blocking the following list of applications here. We have things like Command Prompt, RedServe, Run DLL, and our good friend PowerShell there, all of these things that are built into Windows. Now, from an IT perspective, they might look at this list and say, well, that's great. I don't think there's any users that need to use these tools on their machine. However, there are tools in the background, RMM tools, management tools, that need things like PowerShell to still work, to do some scripting, some automation, some logging. Maybe every once in a while we need to hop into Command Prompt to maybe add a printer, and that's perfectly fine because we can almost guarantee that there isn't a user out there using these tools through Microsoft Office legitimately. So to take away Office's ability to be weaponized by going to any of these tools, we're simply blocking the interaction between them while still leaving these tools available. So things like PowerShell are still there. They can still be used in the background for all the great things that we need to do with PowerShell. However, we know that the bad guys love PowerShell too. So that also comes ring fence by default to keep users safe from things like this here. Now, this is simply an example of one of our rubber ducky scripts. So this gets hidden in something that looks like a fake flash drive or an iPhone charger cable. It gets dropped in a parking lot for somebody to pick up, thinking, great, I just found a brand new fresh iPhone charger cable. My phone's almost dead anyway, so I'm going to go walk in the office, plug this into the computer, plug it into my phone. Phone starts charging. That's great. What's not great is that this just kicked off this little command here, which is going to open up a PowerShell prompt in the background, utilize PowerShell to create a Google Cloud storage location, and start exfiltrating all of the data that can be accessed through that endpoint. And don't worry if you're not the type to pick up a dirty iPhone cable or USB drive off the ground. This can also be embedded in an image, an email, a link, something incredibly easy for almost every user to access here. And not only does this run in the background, but typically your antivirus tools, your EDR tools are just going to kick back and watch this happen because AVs, they're looking for a bad guy. Well, in this case, there is no bad guy. It's just PowerShell, again, a Windows tool built into your machines. EDRs, they're a little bit smarter. They're looking for some infection, encryption, lateral movement, maybe even an indicator of compromise connecting to a malicious IP. But again, none of that is happening. Your computer is having a nice little chat with Google, which inherently is not a bad place to talk to. But if we check our blocked items list over here, we can see a good bit of PowerShell entries. And we can see that PowerShell is being ring fenced, meaning again, we did not take PowerShell away, but PowerShell tried to do something we are not letting it do. And if I scroll down here, we'll see again, I am blocking a couple of little applications here, making sure we don't get to BitLocker Internet Explorer through PowerShell. But more importantly, I'm also blocking PowerShell's access to your files. So now PowerShell is no longer able to just go in and grab whatever files it wants on your machines, exfiltrate them, encrypt them, delete them. But if PowerShell does need to get to certain files, folders, extensions, we can make exceptions for that, granting PowerShell read and write, or maybe just read access to only the files that it absolutely needs to touch on any of your systems. We can also do this for the registry, just as well as the internet, which is already restricted by default. So that even if a malicious script is able to somehow run in your environment and it says, hey, PowerShell, go grab all these backups I just found and send them to that server over there, or a weaponized application, Spotify gets weaponized and says, hey, PowerShell, go reach out to that server over there, download this payload and start attacking these machines. Well, PowerShell is simply going to say, what servers are you talking about? Because it's not able to reach out to the internet to fulfill those malicious requests. However, we make things easy for you. So during learning mode, we'll go ahead and learn the addresses you guys are already utilizing PowerShell to reach out to, and we'll add that to the list for you so that once your environment does get secured, you can still go get your updates for your Logitech mouse and keyboard, updates for Microsoft Teams, and of course, Burk I.T would have access to this list. So if they see something that's really not trustworthy on this list, they can, of course, vet it and remove it or add values later as needed. And that is just with PowerShell and Office. As you can see here, we bake in a good bit of these ring fence policies by default, covering about 90% or so of those common attack vectors, but always leaving room to add more ring fencing to further increase that security. So that is our application control there. From there, we can extend that zero trust onto the network layer with network control. And again, that's going to start off with visibility in the unified audit, showing all of the network traffic in and out of our endpoints. But from here, this is our centrally managed endpoint firewall control tool. I'll give a good example of how this works here, just utilizing RDP to remote in from my local workstation here to my demo server, where I can go ahead, start establishing this connection. And while we watch the screen bar scroll, I'll point out we are a zero trust solution. So we are using this default deny stance here on my servers, making sure that if there's not an explicit permit policy to allow that connection, it simply times out and fails. Now, the good news is if I do want to allow any given connection like RDP, all I have to do is deploy one of these policies here, where in this case, I'm permitting RDP by object instead of the more traditional route of opening up those ports on those machines, where you would typically have to go to each server, open up that port, in this case 3389 on the Windows firewall, and leave it open for the list of IPs that you would like to grant access to. Now, one IP, not too much work there, but that gets more and more cumbersome as you have to add more and more people, leading some to say, you know what, I'll go ahead and add my whole internal subnet. I trust this network here. Well, that starts off good until people start bringing smartphones in and joining the network there, bringing in IoT devices, maybe smart light bulbs, smart water bottles, everything smart nowadays that all gets on the network. And now that would all have access to your server on port 3389 to be able to remote into it, and we don't really need that. So to make things nice and easy but still secure, we can instead use objects, which are simply our Threatlocker protected endpoints. And I can come into this centralized location, build a nice, quick, and easy policy that says I want to allow access to my servers on port 3389, as long as they are one of my permitted objects here, which I have my desktop listed, but I do not have to get that specific. I can come in and say, I would like if only my Threatlocker protected workstations were able to access the server on this port, or maybe every Threatlocker protected device in this environment should be able to access the server on that port. That's going to be really advantageous, especially because we can mix and match these policies where maybe I do want to open up my server to an entire internal subnet, but only on a specific port, maybe only port 53 for DNS. Everyone should have internet access. However, I know my smart light bulbs should never be remoting into my server to steal data, establish any backdoors or other connections there. So I leave this port restricted to only my Threatlocker protected devices. And once that policy has been implemented, those users on the list can then easily establish these connections, again, as if Threatlocker is not even there. But the best part is, while you guys are not accessing your internal resources there, we keep those ports closed. So at 3, 4, 5 in the morning, when no one's utilizing that resource, that port's closed. It's not being scanned. It's not being brute forced, keeping you guys much more secure with zero trust. Now with that, we'll keep on moving through storage control. Same premise here. We're going to grant you that visibility in the unified audit, that visibility over reads, writes, movement, deletion of data, moving across endpoints, moving across interfaces, USB, network drives. All of that visibility is there, but so is the control, where I can come in. I have a good bit of policies built. The ones at the bottom, just granting that visibility by default. But then up top, some more specific policies I've added to increase the protection. Starting with something like my public share policy, where Bob, my demo user, is able to get into this public share. We have a good bit of Office documents here, and as you saw earlier, Office has no problems running, so my demo document opens just fine. Now, I'm also going to open that same document with another application that runs just fine, and that's going to be Notepad++. Now, in this case, you'll see that my application itself does open. Again, it is allowed to by application control, but my document does not open. Now, if we take a look at this public share policy, you might notice that while I am permitting reads and writes for every single file in this directory, one other thing that I'm doing is limiting that access to just the following programs here. And this list is going to include things like Explorer, because I want my users that do have the permission to see these files to be able to see those files. But then from there, I know I'm only going to have Office documents in that share. So sticking with that zero trust, least privilege access principle, I'm making sure only my Office applications can have access to those documents. And what that does for you is it inherently blocks things like ransomware, malware, viruses, unwanted or weaponized applications that should have never had access to that data in the first place from being allowed to interact with your documents, blocking any exfiltration, blocking encryption, blocking deletion there, to things that, again, don't need to touch those files. And that becomes incredibly important if you guys have things in your environment like backup shares or QuickBooks or other financial shares there, we know there will be users that need to access the data in these drives. However, Windows is going to say, well, then if someone needs to get in that share, I'm going to give every single piece of software on this machine that same level of access to the files in these shares, which we don't need. I don't need Spotify touching my QuickBooks documents. I don't need PowerShell or Command Prompt being able to exfiltrate or delete my backups. I don't even need users looking at my backups and having the ability to touch them. The only thing that I need touching my backups in my environment is going to be my backup tool. So that's why it's the only thing that makes the list. Now we can get more granular than that, saying only certain users, only certain machines can touch these files. You can only touch these files if you have Threatlocker installed, but we don't just protect shares. We'll protect your DVDs, local drives, CDs, even removable USB drives, or we can get as broad as saying, let's just deny them all. But we're here for granularity, so we can get way more specific than that, giving users the ability to request access, where they might know this is an environment where I'm not allowed to use USBs by default. However, I'm on the marketing team. I'm working on a big project. I need to be able to pull some pictures off of a specific USB drive. So I go ahead and make my request here. Now, with that request, Burk I.T is going to have the ability to see not only the general request, but they're also going to have the specific serial number of that USB drive that was requested. Now, because we're on a live demo, it's not going to want to pop up for me instantly, but I'll go ahead and bring that up over here. And there is that serial number. So again, granularity is going to be the name of the game, where we can come in here and decide, sure, you can use this one very specific device in this environment, but only on this one computer. Maybe only if you're this user. Or maybe, hey, boss man wants to be able to use his USB drive across the entire environment. We can do that as well. We can get as specific as saying read-only access to only a certain type of file. You can just pull those images off. You're not taking my backups or important data with you. And we can apply a time limit here. If that user only needs an hour to go ahead and pull those pictures off, we can give that hour. And then after that point, that drive is no longer good in the environment. But of course, if no USBs means no USBs, they're able to ignore these requests as well, keeping them from being used right from the start. And that is the Threatlocker solution, just showing how Zero Trust can be implemented in a number of layers there to keep you all safe. And with that, I'll open the floor up to any questions.
Deshaun, thank you very much. That is, a fantastic overview of the product, and I hope everyone's getting value of this. We're excited to take any questions you have. Just something that I would add, a lot of the folks that are participating or will watch this demo and this webinar after the fact are dealing with heavily regulated environments. They're dealing with regulations from, FDIC, Federal Reserve, from, Tennessee and Virginia state banking requirements, from medical providers, from CMMC and NIST requirements, all of those things. Threatlocker provides a lot of the controls that your environment is going to need. It's going to deal with things like application control and whitelisting. It's going to deal with things around zero trust storage and a lot of the controls that we're seeing from the standards and frameworks that are being applied from a regulatory perspective. So it's one of the reasons that this is such an important partnership for Burk I.T. to be able to help your organizations have these controls, help you deal with the audit findings and regulatory findings that you're dealing with, but more importantly, just to keep everyone safe and secure. I've said this to everyone that we deal with. We do not recommend products that we don't run ourselves. Threatlocker is running on every device here at Burk I.T. My engineering team can tell you all about that because they've learned to have to navigate some of these challenges and why it brings so much security value to our organization. So we openly endorse this and happy to answer any questions anyone has. If we don't have anything at this time, I'm going to really quickly throw up this slide so everybody can see. You can always reach out to us directly. You can reach out to our website, obviously. You can reach out to me at the link that we have provided there, the email address, Ben at Burk ITC. We're happy to take any questions that you come up with after you drop offline and you realize, why did I not ask this or that or the other? Or why did I not cover this topic? That's fine. We all understand that. So please don't hesitate to reach out and we will get you the answers that you need. Well, if we don't have any other questions, Deshaun, thank you very much for walking us through the product and showing us all the value that Threatlocker can bring to an environment. We're excited to be able to partner with Threatlocker and to have this solution to provide for our clients.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks again for having me.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for participating and for attending. And if no one has any questions, we'll drop off. I'll give everybody some of their day back and we'll talk to everybody soon. Thank you all very much.